And then, like I said, I will just go through briefly what we went through. And I think, the purpose of this practice that was taught by Atisha, last time we mentioned. Atisha is the one who perfected these teachings, and then his sole mission in life was to spread the teaching of Lojong, the mind training, the 7 points of mind training. So he dedicated his life to spreading this teaching to benefit sentient beings. And then the reasons that he saw was, there were kind of like 5 points that he saw that it was kind of necessary. So the one, all those 5 points are very general points, very basic points, which humans now have kind of neglected ignored those basic understandings, and then kind of moved on from that phase. So when we live a life without without understanding and making those the 5 points, if we ignore it, then the perspective of the perspective on life kind of becomes a different perspective, a different approach towards life, the meaning of life. So the first reason was understanding that the human lifespan is about 100 years. That is the lifespan of a human being. And then within that 100 years of lifespan, anything can happen, like accidents or sicknesses, or disease, or conditions that are not very livable. Yeah? The change of happiness and suffering and so on. And then also understanding that like disasters like earthquakes and tsunamis and so on. Whatever harms that the lifespan of a human, the condition to be able to change that condition from in an instant. And then also the second point is that understanding karma. It has got to do with karma. When one's karma is ripened, it will take effect. No matter what kind of karma, be it a positive karma or a negative karma. But this is from an individual. But then also there are something that is known as common karma, which is got to do with a cluster of people or a group of or society or a country or so that karma kind of also gets shared with not just one but the whole cluster of people. So when that happens, also there can be natural disasters and so on, famine, poverty, sicknesses, disease, and so on. And also, when times like these, we live in a time when everything is happening. So how we the kindness and then the affection, compassion that we can show to others, it becomes very limited. It becomes more of a self-concern. Okay? And then also, now we live in a world where it has developed so much, be it through convenience-wise, for everyone. And then also the human kind of touch is becoming kind of less and less, we can say. And I mean, in times like this, it is important to get in touch with oneself, and then to be able to find that reason to use our kindness. So this becomes a very important role, especially for the practitioner. And then also one reason is that in times like these, we, like I said that time, we become more self-concerned, more kind of protective, like more protective, more sides. When there's more sides, and then even in the mind, in our mind stream, there is this. I mean, everybody is with flaws, but then we have that. What do you call it? A way of thinking of self gain. So it's and not being able to think for the benefit of others, but rather just for the benefit of ourselves. And then when this kind of mindset is there, then a lot of problems also comes along with that. It creates disharmony within societies. It creates a lot of I can say gossips, or I'm not coming up with the right words, but like bad intentions and so on. I mean, we have all had this kind of experience also. So it creates slowly that kind of mindset, that kind of perceptions. And so it creates the disharmonies, be it in a religious society, be it in a social, cultural, or political, or even the government. And then it all comes down to, I mean, all this is coming from the ego. And then on the other side, the last reason is said, what is more problematic in life is our disturbing emotions, like the emotions that we go through, how we receive the emotions, how we see the emotions, and then how the emotions overtake us, and then we don't see the other side. We follow the emotions. And then for a Dhamma practitioner, it is, I mean, that is what we need to focus on. So that was the 5 points of why we should, I mean, the 5 points why a teacher kind of saw that it is, that why sentient beings needed to practice this 7 points of mind training in order to overcome what is happening, and how this world is kind of evolving into something different. And then so that was the 5 points, and then the first point of this mind training is the preconditioning. Preconditioning meaning the way of basically it's having an understanding on why we should practice, or why I need to practice. It's kind of like that. I want to find that answer, kind of thing. So the first part, in the first paragraph, it's I mean, it kind of lets us know that I mean, there's a small advice that is given to us, saying that once we partake this this practice, I mean, once we decide to do this practice, we should have some commitment. We should have some strong will, some dedications put into it, and then constantly to be consistent, basically. To be consistent, and then to do our best. Yeah? And then also it says that to have all those knowledge, to have those knowledge of, any kind of teachings, and then if we don't apply them in our daily lives, then it is just like a beggar. Yeah? A beggar owning a very precious jewel, like a priceless stone, let's say. But the beggar not knowing that of its value, that stone's value. But instead, every day it goes out seeking, begging for money. So, and then also to have that gratitude to oneself, because to be in this form, in a human form, where all the conditions are pleasant, is there, and then also to be to have access to the Buddha's teachings, and then to be able to have all of those conditions met, and then to have gratitude towards the sense, to have that sense of how grateful and that opportunity that we have right now. Yeah, last time I read this phrase by itself, I think, and I think it explains it best. So I just repeat myself again. It says, "It is not by chance." Do you have the book?
Yes.
Page 13.
13?
13.
13.
It is not by chance that we are born into the human realm. It can only be the result of a positive karma accumulated in past rebirths. And this is also something very general. Yeah, we understand this. I mean, we, especially as a practitioner, as a Buddhist, having this belief and faith that we have rebirths, we accumulate karmas. How we accumulate karmas is within the mind, how we think. And then if the mind is not very clear, we get affected. The ego gets affected. When the ego gets affected, the emotions obviously arise. When emotions arise, then we tend to let our emotions take control of us, or of the mind, of the situation, or whatever the situation may be. There's only one understanding, that the mind is overpowered by our emotions. The reason is having that strong grasping towards the ego, because the ego, ourselves, we are the center of the universe. We are the most important thing. That is what we believe. That is how we go on with our daily lives. Whatever we buy, whatever we eat, how we go on with our everyday lives, we want the best for ourselves, and that is what everyone's approach is. Yes. And then when we look into our minds, we see so many disturbing emotions. That means we may be in the human form, but we are imperfect human beings. We are by no means in control of our present situation. Emotions dominate. We are driven into things against our better judgment. The consequences of that could be a rebirth into the lower realms. In the present state, there is no certainty that we shall reincarnate as human beings, for our minds are not in control. Our emotions dominate. given the urgency of our predicament, it would be very unwise not to be deeply committed in practicing the mind training. To give an example is, if someone is very much intoxicated with alcohol, let's say, the decisions, whatever he says, does, or acts from that mind can be very emotionally driven. That can cause, and the consequences can be, let's say, the intoxicated person over a very small thing made a very big deal to protect his self. But in his mindset, he was kind of, he believes to protect that self. And then it escalates to a state where it's not very pleasant. A fight breaks out. So someone gets hurt, and then the person ends up in prison. And then that all happened because of that his emotions were his emotions overpowered him. But in our view, when we witness that situation, we kind of we can pity him. We can pity him all because he was too intoxicated. He couldn't think clearly. We can see what happened clearly, and then we also kind of have some sympathy or some pity over him of his doings. So it's just like that. It's here. It says. Also in the state of in the barbar state, let's say, if our emotions is overpowering us, then that judgment can be a very bad judgment, because we can be reborn in the lower realms, because the emotion has overpowered us and made that judgment for us. So I think this was just the briefing from last time. I'm sorry if it's not very clear. So now is the second point of my training. I think this is where we stopped last time. The second point basically talks about generating, basically how to understand oneself better, to get a better perspective of why to be more compassionate. What are the benefits of being more compassionate, and what are the benefits of showing kindness to others? And so for that, there is two bodhicittas. It's called the relative bodhicitta and then the ultimate bodhicitta. Just now, the first part is talking about the relative bodhicitta. I think I'll just read this here, page number 15. The fourth line from the bottom. It says, we might begin by thinking how we ourselves always reach out for happiness and shrink from sufferings. That is not just the way we feel, that is even the smallest insects when it comes to happiness and suffering. This is something very general. We want happiness. We don't want suffering for oneself, and then that is the what do you call it? That is the kind of the fuel that drives us to live to live our life. The concept or the approach to life is we want happiness, and then we want to avoid suffering at any cost. And this is our way of living this life. And then it's not just humans. Here it says that even the smallest of insects, they have the same approach. They have the same, and they want the same. They want happiness and sufferings they tend to avoid. So the perfect example for this, is the Buddha himself. I mean, we all know the story of Buddha. The Buddha was a prince. He lived in a palace when everything was very pleasant. The view was pleasant, and the food, the comfort, and everything was very pleasant for the Buddha. And then the educations that he received was it was all from the best teachers that were living in that era. So he was receiving all those the best educations from all the scholars and teachers. But then something wasn't enough for him. There was always something missing. And one day when he went out, as everyone knows, he saw birth, old age, sickness, and then death. I mean, that was the first time that he saw that. So after that, something went through his. I mean, he was struck very forcefully with that, with seeing, encountering those four. What do you call it? The four stages. And then the thing that went through his mind is that all his loved ones, all his people, I mean, since he was the prince, I mean, obviously his wife, his son, his father, all the family members, he knew that everyone would go through that suffering. And then, since he being the prince, all the people in his country will also go through all that, all the suffering, and then eventually death. So then that is the reason why he gave up everything, and then he went on to the quest of on finding the meaning. So this is the perfect example of the Buddha himself. And then also Buddha understood that in order to help others, one needs to have a certain kind of realization oneself. If we have that realization, that wisdom, that experience, then one may be able to help others as well. So I mean, we need to have a certain level of realization, in order to help others, and so this is basically relative bodhicitta. This kind of attitude is relative bodhicitta. And then the ultimate bodhicitta is basically attaining that realization of Buddhahood, and then benefiting all sentient beings. I mean, that aspiration, that attitude, basically. So that would be the next step. But just now, I think we should focus on just the relative bodhicitta first, because that is the step. So on page number 17, if you read the middle paragraph, it says the approach to which we can cultivate bodhicitta. Bodhicitta can be also understood as the good quality of the mind, basically. It's by practicing the practice of giving and taking. All the sufferings of the sentient beings we gladly take, and all the happiness in our power to give, and we give it to all the sentient beings without exception. And this is a meditation in which we exchange ourselves with others in compassion. Yes, like I said before, when we generate bodhicitta, we are supposed to do that practice on behalf of all sentient beings. But like I said before, when we practice in the beginning, the first thing, to be able to relate to that all sentient beings. It is always better to familiarize ourselves with that concept. It's to include our near and dear ones. So it's our families, our friends, and so on. The people within your circle. So just now, it's when we are giving and taking. Taking all the suffering of your near and dear ones. Yeah? And then when you give to your circle of people all the good qualities of life, let's say. Then when we mean suffering here, suffering doesn't necessarily mean a physical suffering or something that is very obvious to you. Suffering can also mean that that grasping to the self, that getting empowered by our emotions, and then making not being able to make the better judgment, but making the wrong judgment because of our emotions, and then that accumulates in the mind. It accumulates karmas, imprints, and then which causes suffering. Or it can be any kind of sufferings that is in your mind. And whatever you think of suffering, you can also imply that, because since this will be this is a meditation too. Yeah? We simply sit down and then we basically try to get a clear understanding on this. Basically to get satisfaction, let's say. Satisfaction might not be the right word, but something similar to that. Yes, selfless satisfaction. And then we'll also explain a little bit more later on here on this give and take practice. So in order to do this give and take practice more confidently, and then to do it without any doubts, because sometimes I think there was a lot of when we practice this practice, there is always this concept of when I receive all the sufferings of others, then I am getting the suffering. So it creates some kind of like a conflict to the practice. So in order to understand that better, it explains here that we need to see ourselves as always being the first priority. We always put ourselves first, let's say. We want the best for oneself, and so on. And that is one option. And then the other option is the total opposite of that. What if we want the best for others, rather than making myself the first, the most important thing? What about if I see things in a different way, and then what if I make the objective to help is not the self and wanting the best things for myself, but rather to the other. So these are two two analyzations that we can do when we meditate again. And so when we do those two analyzations of which one would be more rewarding in the end it comes down to yourself. Yeah? So which one would be more rewarding to yourself? If you put yourself as the first priority, would that be more rewarding? And you should also see that the results that it rewards you by analyzing that first. And then on the other hand is making others the first priority and not making yourself the first priority. And then you should also see how rewarding this is also. So the two, you should keep these two together, and then to see the positive results of both. Yeah? So basically, finding pros and cons on this the self, and then the pros and cons on helping, being kind to others. And you should be the judge yourself on which one is more rewarding, which one is more, like I said that time, satisfaction, but selfless satisfaction. And also when we do this, we should, this can be like a little game that you play also. You are meditating, but then the findings of what results it makes you understand can be interesting. So, and then also you should use your own sense of logic, common sense, logic, and so on, to reason with them. So it should be equally the same. You should not choose a side. You should not be supporting one side or the other side. Well, you should just be like the judge. So you try to see everything, weigh it down, and then the results will be different for everyone. How we analyze. And then here it says before there was a very famous practitioner, a yogi, who used to practice this mind training, and then he had two colored stones. So every time he got one positive outcome from the self, making the self the priority. Yeah? So he put one black stone there. In one side, let's say the left side, and then the more on the other side, making helping others. And then, when he found one reason, one good rewarding reason, he put one white stone there. And then in the beginning, the black stone was piling up more and more and more and more and more. And then, but again, he meditated upon the same thing, and then it changed. Everything, the black stones became less and less and less and less, and then the white stones became more and more and more. Meaning that it is more rewarding to be kind, not selfless, not selfish. But when you practice, you don't need to use stones, I guess. You can use your mobile phone, note it down, or use something else. They have the stickers, the counting, what do you call that? Yeah, you can use anything. It doesn't have to be stones, white stones and black stones. In those days, I think stones were everywhere. Yes, Yeah, and then there are also, we see many examples, I mean, living examples in our lives also. People who were very successful, did everything in their life, but then somehow did everything in their life through that concept of the self being the priority. You know, when you are in that position where you can get anything, I mean, you will always treat yourself. Yeah? If that priority is the self, always the self. So you will buy the best things, you will do everything, experience everything for the self. But somehow that wasn't very, in the end, when that kind of lifestyle kept going up in one line, always that quality of life. Yeah? And then it becomes something, a sense kind of comes in. So then they don't find the meaning of life with that living kind of concept. But rather than they turn to charity and then giving to others, helping others in whatever power that they can give, they do that, and then that kind of brings them some kind of joy, some kind of happiness, some kind of meaning of life to them. I think Anita Mui, everyone knows Anita Mui, so she kind of had that kind of similar thing. It's just like what the yogi in the mountain he was doing. So first, when he meditated, it was the self. He found a lot of good reasons for the self. You know? First, the self being the priority, and that's when all the black stones piled up a lot. Then the white stones were very less. But then, as he meditated upon that, then he could see the change. That in the end, something was missing. You know? So all the black stones were down, and then all the white stones kind of piled up. So if you look at it in a different way, I mean, we can see it with people. Yeah? I mean, people that we might know as well, also. But that is more of the obvious reasons. Let's say the obvious reasons of life. But we need to. But this practice will enable us to go deeper. Yeah? Because we are meditating, and then it's not something about the obvious reasons, but it's more of a subtle, a deeper understanding. So when we meditate like that and analyze and try to find what is more rewarding. Yeah? And then as you practice, then there will come a day when you be the judge and decide. So it can be either one of them. If it's the black stones more piled up, then it simply means that we have to practice more. If all the black stones are eliminated, then you be the judge, meaning that you have kind of you have a different perspective. And then when we do the give and take practice, it's like a visualization too. Bringing in all the sufferings and giving out all the positivities in your power. Then when we do that practice, then there is no doubt. When you do that, you can do it confidently because you know it is more rewarding. It is more better. So when you do that practice, then it's more. You can do it confidently. And then in the post meditation as well, when we go on with our everyday lives, I think it will make life much easier as well. It will make life much easier. And also in the post-meditation, it is also, we can also contemplate on the people. It is because of them that we are able to come to this understanding, to be able to have this different perspective on living, and to show gratitude towards all sentient beings. It's because without them, we will not be able to do this practice. So that is that is like a bonus point, I guess, from this practice. It enhances your wisdom. Yes. But then there is always that saying, don't take my kindness to be my weakness. So, in this in this era that we are living, yes, if you're too kind, then it's people see it as a weakness, and so they can use you in different ways. So, but when you encounter, when you are faced with this kind of situations, then there is always skillful methods that you can apply. A skillful method means basically, in a very simple explanation, is all you need to do is have good intentions for the others. Good intention for yourself, good intention for others. And whatever you say, behave, or act is okay. It's still positive. It's not a negative quality mind. It's not coming from the negative quality from the mind. It's still coming from the positive quality from the mind, which means you're still in touch with your bodhisattva mind. So there's always skillful methods that you can use, but then, yes, and then it's always to be in that role of keeping others as the main priority, helping others, and showing your kindness towards others. And so this is the first point of mentoring. So next time we can move on to the third one. And today, if there's any questions on this, especially.